In the true crime world, we often talk about the scream, the gunshot, or the sirens. But for the family of Christelrose Ramirez, the nightmare didn't begin with a noise. It began with a void. For 11 days, 264 hours, the only response from the vibrant 31-year-old was a digital dead end. No text back. No likes on Instagram. Just a phone ringing out into a hollow space that her father, Ricardo, knew in his gut was growing wider with every passing second. Imagine the I-45 corridor in North Houston. It's a place of constant motion, of thousands of lives blurring past at 70 miles per hour. But just off the shoulder, where the asphalt meets the encroaching brush of the Greenspoint area, the world stands deathly still. On a cold December morning, a discovery was made there that would shatter the community's hope. It wasn't just what was found, but how it was found. Abandoned in the tall grass, discarded like industrial waste, sat a single blue plastic barrel. It was sealed. It was heavy. And as investigators approached it, the humid Texas air carried a truth that no one was ready to hear. This isn't just a story about a missing person. It is a story about the precise moment when a perfect relationship curdles into a terminal obsession. Before we talk about the man who led police to this wooded grave, and before we talk about the mattress, the shell casings, and the betrayal, we have to talk about the light that was extinguished to keep a dark secret. To understand the gravity of what was lost in that barrel, you have to understand Christelrose Ramirez. She wasn't a statistic, she was a whirlwind. Born and raised in the heart of Houston's vibrant community, Christelrose was the pulse of her family. Her father, Ricardo, describes her not just as a daughter, but as his bright light. From a young age, she possessed an almost magnetic social energy. She was the girl who remembered birthdays, the one who could diffuse a tense room with a single look, and the one whose laughter was often heard before she even entered a room. Her genealogy is one of deep roots and fierce loyalty. The Ramirez household was built on the foundation of being there for one another. This is why the silence was so deafening. Christelrose was chronically online in the way many 31-year-olds are. Her life was a digital scrapbook of smiles, outfits, and dreams. She was a woman who took pride in her appearance and her independence. She was working, she was striving, and she was looking for a partner who could match her vibrance. By 2022, she thought she had found that in a man named Jesus Varela. To her friends, the early days looked like the blueprint of a modern romance. Photos of them together showed a couple that seemed synchronized. But as we look back through the lens of what we know now, the color in Christelrose's life was being systematically drained. In this section, we are going to look at the photos she posted versus the text she sent in private. We're going to look at the girl who loved the Houston skyline, and how her world began to shrink until it was no larger than the four walls of an apartment on Airtex Drive. Because before the 11 days of silence began, there were months of quiet warnings. And to find out why Christelrose ended up in the woods, we have to look at the man who claimed to love her, and the shadow he cast over her bright, colorful life. To understand how a vibrant life ends in a barrel in the woods, we have to look into the shadows cast by the man standing in the center of this tragedy. Jesus Varela. In the courtroom, he appeared in an orange jumpsuit, shackled, speaking only through a translator to proclaim his innocence. But investigators and those who knew him paint a much more complex and disturbing picture. Varela, 48, was a Honduran national who had been living in Houston for nearly 20 years. For most of that time, he maintained a facade of normalcy, working full-time and moving through the city unnoticed. But public records and court documents reveal a history that suggests a man who lived under the radar by design. While he didn't have a massive public profile, he was well known to the authorities by the time December 1st arrived. At the time of his arrest, he was immediately placed on a hold by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Acquaintances described a temperament that could shift without warning. This wasn't a man who was always loud. He was a man who used control. According to prosecutors, he didn't just exert power over Christelrose. He tried to dominate his own family. When the walls began to close in, he reportedly turned on his own nephew, Juan Carlos. Documents allege that Varela didn't just confess to the crime. He struck his nephew in the chest, grabbed him by the shirt, and issued a chilling ultimatum: "I've already killed one person and I want to kill another." This wasn't an outburst of passion. It was the calculated intimidation of a man who believed he was above the law, a man who viewed the people in his life as assets to be managed or obstacles to be cleared. Every domestic tragedy has a slow burn, a period where the red flags are raised but the world hasn't yet caught on. For Christelrose and Jesus, who had been in an on-and-off relationship since 2019, the cycle was becoming increasingly toxic. The anatomy of their relationship was a textbook example of the prisoner effect. In his own interviews with police, Varela admitted that they had argued around Thanksgiving. What? Because Christelrose had accused him of keeping her like a prisoner in their own home. She was a woman who loved the world, yet she was being confined to the four walls of an apartment on Barclay Street. In the true crime community, we look for the tipping point. For Christelrose, that point may have come in November. There was a domestic violence dispute in November where police were called to the home. In a cruel twist often seen in these cases, it was Christelrose who ended up being arrested that night. But the family knew the truth. They saw the light leaving her eyes. Her father, Ricardo, later said he sensed her death was soon. She was living in a state of hypervigilance, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then there is the evidence that the killer tried to scrub away, but couldn't. When investigators finally entered that bedroom on Barclay Street, they found the physical remnants of a struggle that had been brewing for months. There were dried blood stains on the walls, in the shower, and most tellingly, above the bed where Christelrose would have been sleeping. But there was one specific incident months prior that served as the ultimate warning. A moment involving a firearm where the threat was made clear. If you leave, you don't leave alive. By late November, Christelrose was done. She was quiet, she was withdrawn, and she was planning her exit. She was looking for a way out of the Barclay Street apartment, out of the shadows, and back into the light of her family. What she didn't know was that while she was planning her escape, Jesus Varela was already planning his own solution. A solution that involved a blue chemical barrel, a wooded area off I-45, and a silence that he intended to make permanent. On the morning of December 1, 2024, the world continued to turn for the city of Houston. But inside a home in Independence Heights, time had already frozen. This is the day the digital heartbeat of Christelrose Ramirez flatlined. According to prosecutors, the end didn't come during a heated shouting match or a public brawl. It came in the most cowardly way possible. Investigators allege that while Christelrose was asleep, in the one place she should have been safe, Jesus Varela took a firearm and ended her life. He didn't just take her future. He began a cold, calculated process of erasure. While the morning commute was peaking, Varela's phone was already telling a story he hadn't yet written. Location data would later place him at the very spot where a blue chemical barrel would eventually be found. To the outside world, Varela was just a man going to work. He clocked in, performed his duties, and maintained a mask of total normalcy. When evening came and Christelrose didn't answer her father's calls, the panic began to ripple. When Ricardo questioned Varela, the suspect had his story ready. She left, he claimed. We argued about her feeling like a prisoner and she just walked out on November 30th. I haven't seen her since. It was a plausible lie, until you looked at the details. Christelrose hadn't taken her car. She hadn't taken her essentials. She had simply vanished into the Texas humidity, leaving behind everything but the clothes she was supposedly wearing. For the next 10 days, the Ramirez family lived in a state of purgatory. While the police began their initial inquiries, the family launched a massive grassroots search. They weren't just waiting for answers, they were hunting for them. They papered the Greenspoint area with flyers. They walked the trails. They reached out to every friend she had. And through it all, there was Jesus Varela, playing the role of the concerned, confused boyfriend. True crime is often solved in the binary, the ones and zeros left behind by our devices. While Varela was telling the family he was praying for her return, his digital footprint was betraying him. Investigators noticed a glaring inconsistency. Why was his phone at a desolate wooded area off I-45 on the very morning he claimed to be at work or looking for her? Why were there social media logins that didn't match Christelrose's usual patterns? In early interactions with the family, Varela's demeanor was noted as off. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't leading the search parties. He was observant. He was watching to see how much they knew. But as the days ticked toward December 10th, Varela's composure began to crack. He knew the search was getting closer to the I-45 corridor. He knew that the void he had created was about to be filled with physical evidence. He didn't just need to hide a body, he needed an accomplice. And that is when he turned to his own blood, threatening his nephew with a chilling statement that would eventually break the case wide open. I've already killed one. I can kill another. The family thought they were looking for a missing person. They didn't realize they were actually walking a trail of breadcrumbs laid by a man who had already moved on to his next victim. The truth itself. On December 11th, the void finally had a physical location. Following a tip that would change the trajectory of the investigation, Harris County deputies arrived at a secluded, wooded patch of land near the 12500 block of the North Freeway. This wasn't a random spot. It was a place where the urban sprawl of Houston tries to swallow itself, a graveyard for dumped furniture and industrial debris. But among the trash sat a single blue plastic chemical barrel. It was sealed tight, standing upright, looking utterly out of place in the natural decay of the forest floor. When the crime scene unit arrived, the atmosphere shifted from a missing persons case to a homicide recovery. The barrel was heavy, far heavier than it should have been if it were empty. Inside, investigators made the discovery that the Ramirez family had prayed they would never hear. Christelrose was no longer missing. She had been folded into this 55-gallon container, a final act of indignity by someone who viewed her life as a problem to be packaged and discarded. Why a barrel? In the psychology of concealment, the use of a container like this signifies a perpetrator who is desperate for distance. They don't just want the body gone, they want it contained, managed, and portable. It suggests a killer who spent time thinking about the logistics of death. For Jesus Varela, the barrel was supposed to be a safe, airtight secret. But in the Texas heat, nature has a way of forcing secrets to the surface. The very method he chose to hide her was the very thing that eventually drew the eyes of the law to that specific coordinate in the woods. While the recovery was happening in the woods, a second team of investigators was tearing apart the apartment on Barclay Street. This is where the concerned boyfriend facade completely disintegrated under the glow of luminol. Varela had tried to clean. He had tried to scrub the history of December 1st away. But forensics tells a story that bleach cannot erase. Investigators pulled back the bedding to find a mattress soaked in blood that had seeped through the fibers in a pattern that suggested a high-velocity event. Blood spatter was found on the walls and even on the ceiling of the bedroom. The analysis was clear. This wasn't an argument gone wrong, or a struggle. This was a targeted, violent act that occurred while Christelrose was in bed. The investigation then turned to Varela's nephew, Juan Carlos. This is where the betrayal becomes multi-generational. Juan Carlos told investigators a harrowing story. He claimed that Varela had confessed to the murder and then forced him, under the threat of death, to help move the heavy blue barrel from the apartment to the truck, and finally to the woods off I-45. Varela allegedly used his own history of violence as leverage, reminding his nephew that once a life is taken, the second one is much easier to extinguish. But the true smoking gun wasn't just the blood or the witness testimony. It was a small brass object found tucked away in the apartment. Forensic technicians recovered shell casings that matched a specific firearm linked to Varela. The ballistics didn't lie. The casings found in the room where Christelrose slept matched the caliber of the wounds found during the autopsy. Jesus Varela hadn't just found a barrel. He had created the need for one. He had executed a plan, coerced his family, and lied to a grieving father's face for 11 days, all while the evidence of his crime was literally drying beneath the sheets of his own bed. The silence was over. The evidence was shouting. And the next stop was the courtroom. On December 15, 2025, the weight of the law finally met Jesus Varela. He appeared in a Harris County courtroom dressed in an orange jumpsuit, his hands shackled, a stark contrast to the man who had casually lied to a grieving family just days prior. The charges were as heavy as the evidence: murder, tampering with a human corpse, assault of a family member, and unlawful restraint. Prosecutors revealed the most chilling detail yet, that while the city slept on December 1st, Varela allegedly shot Christelrose multiple times in her sleep before beginning the grim task of bagging her remains and sealing her in that blue chemical barrel. Through a translator, Varela spoke briefly, simply saying, "I want to say only that I am innocent." But the room felt the hollow weight of those words. The judge, citing public safety and the sheer brutality of the allegations, denied him bond for the murder charge. Additionally, an ICE hold was placed on Varela, a Honduran national, ensuring that even if he could navigate the state's legal system, he would not be walking free. The air in the courtroom grew thick as Christelrose's father, Ricardo Ramirez, stood to speak. With eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and fury, he told the court, "I am going to be here every day to make sure they give him the maximum. All I want is justice for my daughter." Her aunt, Maggie, echoed the sentiment of a community in mourning, telling the press that Christelrose was not just a name on a docket. She was a kind soul who helped strangers and loved the world. The family's pain was compounded by the revelation that police had been called to the home in November for a domestic dispute, a moment where the system failed to see the danger that Ricardo had sensed was coming. As we close the file on this investigation, we must move the camera away from the handcuffs in the courtroom, and back to the woman who started it all. Christelrose Angel Ramirez was a bright light. She was a social media enthusiast, a daughter who checked in, and a woman who believed in the best of people. Her story is a tragic reminder of the shadows that domestic violence creates, where love is used as a cage and silence is used as a weapon. If you or someone you know is feeling like a prisoner in their own relationship, please reach out. There are people waiting to help you break the bond of fear. National Domestic Violence Hotline, 800-799-7233. Text START to 88788. Don't wait for the 11 days of silence. Speak now while your voice can still be heard. This deep dive was made possible by your support. If you found value in this investigation and want to help us keep Christelrose's story, and others like it, alive, please like this video, and it truly is what keeps us going and allows us to spend the hundreds of hours required for these professional deep dives. Leave a comment below. Do you think the previous police call in November was the missed opportunity that could have saved her? Let's discuss it respectfully in the comments. And please share this video. Awareness is the first step toward prevention. Christelrose Ramirez was not a body in a barrel. She was a daughter, a friend, and a light that a dark shadow couldn't quite put out.